This story comes from Mark's account of Jesus' life, from chapter 6, starting at verse 30, and it's really well known. Mark writes this: "The apostles gathered round Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going, they did not have chance to eat. He said to them, 'Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest.' So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. By this time, it was late in the day. So his disciples came to him. 'This is a remote place,' they said, 'and it's already very late. Send the people away so they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat.' But he answered, 'You give them something to eat.' They said to him, 'That would take more than half a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat?' 'How many loaves do you have?' he asked. 'Go and see.' When they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then Jesus told them to make all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 baskets of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of the men who had eaten was 5,000. So this passage is really unhelpfully called the feeding of the 5,000, but it's incredibly inaccurate, that statement, because the Bible only counts the men. And we know that the women were there and the children were there. The reason we know that the children in there, because one of the gospel writers actually says it was a child that brought the food in the first place. So, 5,000 is a very conservative estimate. Let's perhaps at least double that and think Jesus fed this amount of people with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. So, I'm wondering why you think we're talking about this passage when we're talking about gifts, when we're talking about bringing stuff to Jesus, because there's other passages that Jesus talks about serving, he talks about giving of yourself. But I was fascinated by this passage when I was thinking about what to do today. And it's like the simplicity of what was brought. See, I think that sometimes we have an understanding that what we have to bring to Jesus is a finished product, is something that excels, something that's already polished. I want you to imagine this story again, and imagine that what was brought was an abundance of food. So Jesus had, say, 10,000 people there. And then Jesus said, they're all getting hungry. And Jesus said, okay, go and find out what people have got. And then they come back and they say, actually, everyone's brought a packed lunch. And it's amazing. Everyone's brought, more than enough food. And it's really high quality stuff. It's the best kosher food that you can find in the whole of Israel. There are olives, there's milk and honey, there's bread, there's fish. There's the finest. If you go to Israel, they're big on falafels. There's falafels everywhere. It's hummus everywhere. And Jesus goes, that's fantastic. Brilliant. Let's just crack on and have something to eat then, shall we? Do you think that would have made such a great story in this account? And this account happens in, it's not just recorded in Mark's Gospel. It's recorded in the Gospels. that probably wouldn't even made it into the story, would it? Jesus just encourages people to share their lunch. That doesn't have the same sort of great ending, does it, as this story? You see, what happens in this story is Jesus Jesus is faced with a problem. There's something that needs to be resolved. People need to be served in this context. They're hungry. They are in need. Jesus needs to meet that need. But what in the Old Testament has happened, what's different from the Old Testament story and this story? So there are connections, okay? In the Old Testament, God feeds his people, and he does that miraculously. How does he do that? He provides manna from heaven, doesn't he? They wake up in the morning. It's the weirdest of stories that you find in the Old Testament. So the people of Israel have left Egypt. They're walking through the wilderness, and they're starting to get hungry. And Moses says to them, "Don't worry, God's going to provide." They go to sleep. In the morning, they wake up, and something. It's really hard to sort of describe what it is, but the Bible sort of paints a picture of like these little wafery things that are left. In my head, it goes to communion wafers, and if that's the case, that's truly naff provision. But that's not how the Bible says. They every morning they woke up, and there was this bread that had sort of landed on the floor and formed overnight, and they could scoop it up. And God says, you can have as much as you want, eat as much as you want, but don't store it. The only day you can store it is the day before Sabbath, because you're not going to get any on the Sabbath. And if you stored it, here's the funny thing, because they didn't have Tupperware, if you stored it and tried to keep it for the next day, I don't believe that God is going to provide. So what I'll do, because this is our nature, isn't it? This is that. We're going to go, just in case God's not quite as faithful as we think, I'm going to scoop as much of it up as I can. I'm going to keep it in my bag overnight. I'm going to eat what I need now, keep some more for tomorrow, just in case it doesn't happen. And then and God says, I told you that's not to do that. They woke up in the morning and it was all moldy and maggot-ridden. God said, I told you, trust me. The only day that didn't happen was on the Sabbath. On the Sabbath, you woke up and the stuff that you stored from the day before was perfectly fine to eat. And then we all have this other story because people go, that's lovely. But do you know what? I'm getting a little bit fed up of eating this now. Is there anything else? We did used to get meat back in Egypt. You did used to get meat, but let's be honest, you're only getting meat because you were a slave. And we needed to feed you up so you could build and make things for us, These pyramids don't just grow themselves, And so God says, okay, and he provides quail for them as well. Not just like chickens. Quail. That's like Waitrose quality, isn't it? That's you don't get quail in Aldi. But you do get quail in Waitrose and Marks and Spencer. I think that's telling you something about the nature of God's provision. It's good. Is this interesting story of how many quail? No, I think those people that are scared of birds would wake up in the morning and be quite honestly petrified with the amount of quail walking around. But clearly they didn't have a problem with that. They just, and so they had this manna, but God provided miraculously that. But God starts to do something new in the New Testament, and there's a difference in this story to the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, they didn't have to bring anything; they just had to be obedient. Don't store it. That was the obedience. Don't store it; it will go moldy. Trust me. But in the New Testament, God wants to do something with His church. And he says, this is my church. I'm investing in them, but it's always going to be a partnership. And so this is a story about partnership. It's an illustration, not just of a nature miracle where God miraculously, multiplies stuff, but it's about God working with His people. He's saying, what have you got? What is the basics you've got I can work with? And it's a great illustration for the church of where we're at, because what this story is saying to us is God is not looking for quantity. You know, he's happy to work with 5 loaves, 2 fishes, with 10,000 odd people sitting there. He says, I'm not looking for quantity. I'm not looking for quality. You don't have to. He doesn't say, well, quite honestly, that is rubbish. Go back and find some people that have brought some quality food, some Gordon Ramsay style picnic. He says, what have you got? What is the starting point? And the starting point in this story is 5 loaves, 2 fishes. It's the pat lunch of poverty in that culture. It's people that this little boy has brought a little pat lunch that, let's be honest, his mum's made him and said, that'll do for the day, go off. And if my kids can't stand pat lunches, they hate them. And not surprised, it's genetic. I used to hate them as well. Soggy sandwiches, I loathe. And soggy fishy sandwiches, that's even worse. But this is what this boy's brought, soggy fishy sandwiches. And God says, I can work with that. I'll work with that. And it's a message for the church today. God is not looking for quantity. He's not looking for quality. He's looking for anything that you're prepared to offer to him. And he says, that I can work with. Because let's be honest, if everyone brought a pat lunch, there is no need for me. There's just no need. If everyone had brought a pat lunch, there's no God in this story. It's just, well, everyone was sensible enough to bring pat lunch. Well done. But God is, with his church, God is saying, what you're prepared to bring, no matter what it looks like to you, I can work with. In my head, I think we have 2 problems with the church that we face today. The first is capacity, and the second is quality. And it's not because the church doesn't have capacity and it doesn't have quality. It's because the people in the church, that's you and me, think I can only offer to God something that I think has quality or something that I think has capacity. And God says, no, offer something. Leave capacity and quality to me, because let's be honest, whatever you provide is never going to be as good as when God gets involved in the story. When God gets involved into the story, your 5 loaves and your 2 fishes become something miraculous. When your soggy tuna sandwiches get involved in this story, God works miracles. And that's what we're about as a church. So that's why we talked about gifts this morning. I've got a bit of sellotape stuck to me. Under here somewhere. Don't worry. Yeah. Is that all of them? I thought I had oh, I was going to say, well done, Emma. Emma's going to go around and just pass some out of these. There's some more. Perhaps someone can help Emma. Abigail, can you help and perhaps Grace, can you help Emma just put some of those on the tables? It's a little form. It's a little bit of slip of paper. And it's just got a simple phrase on it. What can I give? And don't think that there's nothing on that story. There's nothing in your life that you can't give. You know, we talk about here, Immanuel, getting involved in our vision. You know, we have a vision, we do have a vision, and we have our 3 primary areas that we're focusing on, and our discipleship pathway, our invitation and outreach, and our children and youth. Thank you. It's ingrained in my head, and yet I forget sometimes. But to make church happen requires so much. And we all have a role to play, no matter how old you are, how young you are. And we want you to buy into what we're doing here. So this is just a simple, what have I got that I can give? And for some of you, you might think, I've got some skills that the church may need. Some of you think, I have nothing. And you go, Jesus would say to you, that is not true. That's not how I made you. Because when Jesus creates everyone, he creates them uniquely. So in of itself, you are a gift to the whole of creation because you are unique. It may be that you have skills. It may be that, what can I give? Well, do you know what? I'm a really smiley person. And we'll go, actually, if you're prepared to give God your smile, we'll take that. Because there's people that we give every week on our welcome team that we want with big smiles that welcome people into our church. Because that's really important. The part of our invitation and outreach culture. The smiley ones get at the back. If you're grumpy, you ain't ever going to be on that team. But that's how we work. I want you to think about it. What can I give? We know that we're struggling in certain areas at the moment. Last week I said, I need people to sign up to read the Bible on a Sunday because we're having a bit of a reset at the moment. I want people to sign up to lead some of our prayers on a Sunday because we're having a bit of a reset. I had 2 people come and speak to me last week. I don't particularly think that's very good. This isn't a telling off. This is about me trying to make it easier for you to get involved. So, on the back, next to that big blue notice board to the right-hand side, there's 2 pieces of paper with every Sunday between now and the dreaded C word. That's Christmas, in case you thought I was going somewhere you really didn't want to go. With slots available for prayers, slots available for reading the Bible. Go up there, stick your name down, and we'll make sure you go on our rotas. But these aren't the only rotas that get involved. If you want to help out in other ways, come and speak to me. Come and speak to Shane, who's our administrator. Go and speak to Rob, who is sitting at the back over there, who leads the sort of front of house stuff, which is everything at that end of church. Get involved in some of the lives of church because you don't have to give quantity. You don't have to give quality, but whatever you give, God takes and he uses to multiply. And he blesses. And that's kingdom value. We're going to close now with the blessing. Then you can have a time to chat on your tables if you want. Before we see you again next Sunday, where we're going back to fasting.